It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. Thank you for joining us. A 28-year-old woman has been arrested by Cleveland police after the discovery of two young girls between the ages of 8 and 10, dead in suitcases in a field in South Collinwood. It's a tragedy that has gripped the community. Burke Lakefront Airport could be decommissioned, making way for trails and open space connecting the city to Lake Erie. Or it could be too expensive to build there, too environmentally fraught, and too economically daunting to decommission the airport. Or perhaps there could be a single runway and some new development. All of those ideas were expressed at a Sound of Ideas community tour forum inside the airport terminal this week. Data centers suck a lot of power. Should they have to cover the cost? And should they get tax breaks? Neighbors are expressing concerns and lawmakers are considering next moves. And get ready to spring forward as we set our clocks ahead 1 hour on Sunday and show up an hour late for everything on Monday. Joining me to talk about these and other stories this week from IdeaStream Public Media, environment reporter Zaria Johnson. Good to have you.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Good morning. And also with us from News 5 Cleveland reporter Michelle Jarboe. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
Nice to have both of you here. And in Columbus, a woman who neither springs forward nor falls back. Time moves around her. State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. Hey, Karen.
I don't even know what to say to that. That's just awesome. I have my own time zone, I guess is what you're saying.
Exactly, right. All right, and you can join us by sending an email throughout the show to soi@ideastream.org. And let's get ready to roundtable. I was walking back into the Idea Center Tuesday after lunch, right out here in the lobby. And I saw my friend Rob. You might know Rob. He does maintenance here in the building. Mm-hmm. There was a security guard there as well and visiting mail carrier. And I sat down to chat. Whenever I do that, it's usually Browns or it might be the weather or some other lighthearted issue. And not this time. Two young girls had been found dead a day before, stuffed into suitcases and partially buried in a field in South Collinwood. And for 20 minutes, this off-air panel wrestled with that tragedy. And I think a lot of us are doing a lot of that now. It's reminiscent of the discovery of 11 women dead in the home of Anthony Sowell in 2009, or the 3 women freed from years of captivity in the home of Ariel Castro in 2013. A vigil is scheduled for the 2 young girls today at 4 p.m. near where their bodies were found at East 163rd Street and Midland Avenue. The medical examiner has identified the children as Amor Wilson, 10, and Mila Chapman, 8. DNA testing determined the children are related. Police charged a woman, presumably the children's mother, 28-year-old Aaliyah Henderson, with 2 counts of aggravated murder. She was set to be arraigned in court this morning. We're monitoring that right now. The pretrial has not begun, or the arraignment has not begun yet. And Zaria, let's get into some of the details to start. Authorities have not confirmed that Henderson is the mother of the girls, and this really just knocked me down. There's a photo from 2019 that was taken by the great photographer Lisa DeYoung from the Plain Dealer, where they were doing a story, and these kids are sitting there at a wellness visit at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital with their mother. So we presume, based on that photograph, that she's the mother.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. And it's really just a heartbreaking case the more we learn about it. I think it was Fox 8, spoke to Mila's father. He wanted to stay anonymous, but he shared some stories about sort of dealing with his relationship with Aaliyah Henderson, presumably their mother, saying that he tried to get custody before, and she'd expressed that she might have been stressed out before, but she was giving him, and it seems like Amor's father as well, a bit of a hard time in releasing custody of the kids at that point. Mayor Justin Bibb has said that this is an unimaginable loss. The county, in a statement, called it a tragedy for their families and our entire community. So it just seems like one of those instances of how could this have happened right under our noses? How could they have been in suitcases outside of a school and nobody have found them for however long? And so it's just a heartbreaking case all around.
I saw this man who identified himself as the father, also on Channel 3, also on Channel 19.
Yeah.
I think they were going to the site, and he was there as well. And yeah, he talked about that he's gone through protective services and he's gone through other things, and they weren't able to find the mom. So that's part of that story. By the way, this is the whole conversation we had in that lobby on Tuesday was, how could this happen? How could children be missing?
Right.
One question was, what about the schools? And what I heard Mike Polensek, the council member for that area, say was that he believed they were homeschooled. But then there was also just speculation about, were child services involved? The county has already issued we can't comment on anything, but
Right.
this is a legal case. But there's just so many questions about how something like this can happen. There was a third girl who was found when police went to this home.
Right.
She's been put into county custody?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's I believe not clear exactly how she might be related to Henderson or might be related to the other two girls, but yeah, she's been removed from the home and she's in county custody at this point while the investigation is ongoing.
We don't know at this point how long their bodies were there. We don't know at this point really any of the other facts. Perhaps we'll find out a little bit more today. As we said, the arraignment is happening now. It really has struck home, Zaria, with the folks I was talking to, and really with the reporters. I was just talking to Josh Boos before we came on the air. And, you know, reporters see a lot of things, and we cover a lot of stories. This one seems to really be different. And Josh was saying in his own case, it was like he was having trouble getting through these pieces. And I just wonder some thoughts from you about how this is hitting.
Yeah, I mean, when I read and heard the first few stories on Monday, it was like shocking. It was surreal. It didn't really. I was having a hard time like understanding how something like this could happen. And like I said, the more I learn about it, the more nothing ever feels better, I guess. Especially from a reporting standpoint, it's just this is just one of those stories that just stick with you. And when you brought up Ariel Castro and Anthony Sowell, and growing up, I'd heard these names and I heard about these stories, and so I think it's just it feels a little bit like we're repeating history in that way, where these girls could be missing for so long and nobody knows and nobody reports it, and we're figuring out what shortcomings popped up along the way that led to it.
Yeah. It was pretty, it seems, quick police work. I know that Chief Annie Todd had talked about that, Michelle, that when they went to work on this, she said they used intelligence techniques, et cetera, but they pretty quickly zeroed in on this woman's house and had a search warrant almost immediately.
Yes, actually, we had a news crew out on the street at the moment that this SWAT team, essentially descended on the house. It was a bizarre moment for my colleague who was out there waiting to do a live shot, and it seems clear that the police have put a tremendous amount of energy and time into figuring this out. And I don't know, I can't remember seeing something move quite this quickly.
Yeah.
From late Monday night when an individual was walking his dog and found one of these suitcases in that field to all the news that came out Wednesday evening about a person of interest and so on.
Right. This field is right adjacent to Ginn Academy. It used to be a baseball field. You can see it's kind of grown over and abandoned. This man who also was interviewed by a number of media outlets who found the bodies, what an experience for him. He said he was walking his dog. I think the dog goes off leash, and he just spent a little too much time sniffing over in that area.
Yeah, actually, I was working a late shift on Monday, and one of my colleagues, Scott Newell, ran out when he saw a news release from police about the bodies found, and ended up talking to that neighbor first. And it was clear the man was just that was not what he was expecting. Walking his dog, and
right. He unzipped the suitcase, and this is what he finds.
Mm-hmm. And then immediately called the police, and then the police came out and found a second suitcase. So just a horrible story.
If I mentioned earlier that there was an arraignment scheduled for 9. It has happened. Lee Barr and Aya Cathy are our producers in the booth and monitoring it, letting me know. And they said that Judge Jeffrey Johnson issued a $2 million bond, and she did not speak at that arraignment. So there is a bond. She is jailed and has been arraigned on those cases. Yeah, I think about the Ariel Castro case. We were at the Plain Dealer at the time, and the Sowell case. This is not a great way for Cleveland to get national headlines.
No, and you were talking before about cases that really stick with journalists, and whether or not you're directly covering the story, there are just these cases that, for one reason or another, really strike you. I mean, I remember in 2017 there was the case of a 14-year-old girl, Ileana DeFries, who was kidnapped and brutalized and murdered in an abandoned house. And I was on the periphery of that coverage at the time, but did do a story about these issues with abandoned houses in Cleveland, and just remember the heavy feeling of covering those stories and knowing that these were the things that Cleveland was getting attention for.
I want to let you know that you can weigh in on the conversation by sending email to soi@ideastream.org. It's soi@ideastream.org, whether it's on this topic or any of the others that we addressed during the program. And if it is about this topic and we've moved on, which we're about to do, I'll be happy to go back and share your thoughts as well. Cleveland is at a critical moment and can realize its potential as a world-class waterfront city. But to do that, Mayor Justin Bibb said, Burke Lakefront Airport needs to close, and those 450 acres need to become a connection between the lakeshore and downtown. The mayor and other stakeholders shared their thoughts during a Sound of Ideas community tour stop Wednesday inside the terminal at Burke. The mayor wants to shut the airport by the end of his current term. It was not a unanimous opinion at the forum. Michelle, you were there. What about those? And in fact, I think you were seated between two of these people. Those folks who say that Burke needs to stay open, because we've heard people talk about Burke for decades here, and almost all the time what I hear is, why the heck do we have an airport for rich people? We need to have that as like Chicago. We need some lakeshore and some beach and whatever it might be. But at that forum, what we heard are the advocates, pilots, and others who are saying we need an airport.
Well, certainly those folks know where Burke is.
Yeah,
and
they know how to get in.
Knew to come down for it. So pilots and some aviation groups want Burke to stay open. They say closing the airport is an irreversible decision that's going to force tenants out and put pressure on Hopkins and other airports in the region. And they also believe that Burke has more potential, that the city hasn't properly managed or invested in it to its maximum potential. Meanwhile, the proponents say, look, this is losing money. It's being subsidized by the airlines at Hopkins, and it's 450 acres of lakefront real estate in a city where we have struggled to access our waterfront. There's a higher and better use here.
Yeah, they were saying 2 miles of the 6 between Edgewater and East 55th Marina is covered by airport. So imagine what could happen there. One of the points that the pilot on the panel brought up, Ned Parks, was that the land there is not the kind of thing you'd want to build anything on. That's what he said, and certainly you probably couldn't build skyscrapers there. It used to be Phil, and now it's obviously land for airport. Scott Skinner from the Waterfront Development Corporation said, we know more about that property than pretty much any other property in the city of Cleveland. What did he mean by that?
Well, it's publicly owned, and it's been studied to death over time. And, unlike an industrial property down in the flats that a developer might be stepping in on and saying, okay, we have to do all these environmental studies and figure out what the history is here, there is kind of a provenance on that, right? There's a history there at City Hall. The other thing I will say about fill dirt is, everything north of the Shoreway was the lake at one point. So the Rock Hall is built on fill.
Right.
The Science Center is built on fill. The existing football stadium that's going to be demolished come 2029 is built on fill. So it is possible to build things on fill. And in fact, up by the Rock Hall, there's also a small apartment building that was built on fill. It's possible to build things like living space on that dirt. It just, you have to look at how stable it is and then what you need to do in terms of foundations. And you need to look at, what the legacy uses were and whether there's cleanup that needs to happen.
So not tall buildings, but buildings.
Yeah, which is what the city is talking about and the North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation are talking about. They're talking about low-slung buildings and recreation space.
Yeah, Zaria, they were talking about a lot of walking trails and essentially a place for the public to go. I know one of the big issues was, will it really be public? Because a lot of the lakefront in many communities is for rich people in their homes and their backyards and their own docks or yacht clubs or, in this case, an airport. But that became one of the big issues was, will we have access?
Yeah, and that's been a sticking point when it comes to this North Coast project pretty much since I started reporting here at IdeaStream. Is the mayor's been pretty transparent about his own experience growing up in Cleveland and not knowing about the lake or not being able to access the lake growing up. And he wants to make sure Lake Erie is more accessible for people across the board. And that's what the goal of this North Coast project is. So it sounds like it's still top of mind for the city. And for its partners on this project is ensuring that whatever steps they take to expand access to the lakefront, it stays accessible to all people outside of income, race, things like that.
Okay. You can join us at soi@ideastream.org. I know from that forum that a lot of people have a lot to say about Burke. So if you're one of them, feel free to send us an email, at ideastream.org. One of the points that the mayor brought up during that forum, Mayor Bibb was also a part of that forum, was that Cleveland needs to become and embrace the idea of being a two waterfront city. And he really pointed to all of the activity that's happening on the Cuyahoga River with Dan Gilbert and the Rock Financial and the Cavaliers and all of that kind of stuff. When he talks about that, there already is development planned for the lakefront, but this is an extension of the runway. But what does he mean by two waterfront? Like this, he's saying that this could be distinguishing us not just in the United States, but in the world.
Yeah, so he's talking about this idea that we should make use of the riverfront and the lakefront, and that there should be opportunities for people to touch both of them and not have to pay a bunch of money to get there, and that it should be easier to get between the riverfront and the lakefront as well. That's one of the motivators for this land bridge and some other connectivity projects that are happening downtown. As you alluded to, the riverfront development being driven by Dan Gilbert's Rock family of companies. There's the Cavs practice facility under construction down there. Recently announced plans for a new outdoor music venue, but there's also going to be a lot of public space and ways to step down and get to the river, and even a kayak launch down there. And the lakefront plans, though they're still evolving, also include a significant amount of public space in the area north of where Brown Stadium is right now.
Okay. We have an email from Larry. He says the Burke Airport is an idea from the 50s that's past its time. We're not living in Cleveland of the 50s. Most of the takeoffs and landings are from a flight school. He says it's a waste of prime real estate. The only people championing Burke are the people who use it, which isn't most of us. And it was one of the things I made a point of when I did the introduction at that forum, which is that all of us knows where Burke is, but most people have never been there. I mean, we don't have commercial flights anymore. There used to be you could fly to Cincinnati or Detroit or those types of things. But really, it's if you're a pilot or a student or some of the other uses, or you're using it because you have a private jet.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that it's used for medical transport, so
Absolutely.
like helicopters, organ donations. I will say, if anybody's curious about the terminal there, you can just go down and walk in. And
Yes.
there's the International Women's, the Air and Space Museum that's down there.
Yeah,
so
really cool.
There are a couple things to see. But yeah, if people are curious, you can just go walk around down there and see what it looks like, and then see all of that land stretching out to the water.
I might have been in for my job once or twice there, but I do know one time I covered a story about helicopters over Cleveland, the news helicopters, the medical helicopters, and the police helicopters. And the one pilot allowed me to take the cyclic and try to control this helicopter, and it kept zipping to the right. We were only like 30 feet off the ground, but it kept zipping over the marginal, and people stopped like it was the air show, like we meant it on
wow.
purpose. And this guy would pull it back from me because he had his own control of the student pilot thing. Anyway, I'm not a helicopter pilot. Just don't ever get into a helicopter with me. Let me ask about two other quick things. One is the air show. I just referenced the air show. What an amazing event that we have every year.
Yeah.
And the person who runs the air show, Kim Dell, got up and said, we need Burke to have an air show.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because my mom loves the air show. She said, Kim Dell said that closing Burke would be the kiss of death for the air show. It's a big deal. But Bibb and Skinner and David Gilbert with Destination Cleveland, they all said that they're going to work to keep the air show up and running regardless of whether or not Burke closes. So fingers crossed the air show doesn't go anywhere. I love the air show too. Who doesn't?
Yeah, and the city's response to that was, we can still have an air show the way it is in a number of cities where the pilots take off from another airport, Hopkins, presumably, and then they fly in this area. You'd still maybe have places to view from the new, whatever the new Burke is.
Yeah.
But her point was that there's no revenue from that. You're not selling tickets. There's some other things that are problematic about it.
I mean, those are all things to consider, but I can't tell you how many times I've personally bought a ticket to the air show. We just camp
You
out
look up.
wherever you look up, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people do. But the economic impact is part of this conversation outside of the air show when we think about closing the airport overall. So that's obviously a big piece of it. But if people are saying it's possible without tickets, then it's possible without tickets.
Last thing on the air show, and that is, or on the Burke, is Michelle, the economics of it. Charles Slife, the council member, was on the panel. And I had somebody beforehand say, you don't have enough people that are for Burke on the panel, and all of them want it to be closed. And Charles Slife was clear. He doesn't know what he wants to do yet because there's a whole lot more information you need. specifically about what this will do to the budget of the city and whether it's a smart move and what will happen with the property.
Yeah, City Council right now is midway through a series of 4 hearings related to Burke, where they're trying to dig into the details around everything from the potential impact on the city's finances of a closure to redevelopment possibilities. There are 2 more hearings scheduled in April for people who are interested in that. And really what it comes down to is council members want to make sure that the general fund doesn't take a hit. Right now, Burke is part of a special fund with Hopkins, and it doesn't, even though Burke loses money, that's not coming out of the city's general fund that pays for everyday services. And I will say the mayor said multiple times on Wednesday night that he is committed to protecting the general fund. So the goal here is to find out a way to close Burke and get it redeveloped without there having to be a big burden on the taxpayers.
It was great that we could have this forum. They're having these public hearings. This is not something we've had in Cleveland. We've had Mayor Frank Jackson who said, I'm not talking about it. And obviously, it's not only Mayor Bibb, but the county executive, Chris Renee, and the two of them talked to each other after it was clear the Browns were leaving, saying, this is our project. Let's close it.
And I should say, if people who are listening want to weigh in on what they think should happen with Burke, the North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation has that survey they mentioned online. It's at clevelandnorthcoast.com. I think they said they have about 2,400 responses to it already, so people can go weigh in on the uses they would like to see or things they don't want to see.
Okay. Ohio House lawmakers will decide whether to end a sales tax exemption for data centers. Another proposed bill would extend a tariff that one utility currently slaps on data centers to the whole state. It requires new data centers to cover the bulk of the energy they use. More than 200 data centers are located in Ohio. There's a bunch more coming, and a number of them to Northeast Ohio. And Karen, let's start with the tariff. Currently, AEP imposes a tariff on data centers in its coverage area in central, southern, and northwestern Ohio. How does that work, and what's the plan to extend it?
Well, it's basically an order from the PUCO, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, that AEP has to kind of pay for the extra energy it's using. And so as we've all learned through the whole discussion of the Trump tariffs, a tariff is a tax, essentially. And so this would kind of extend that to the entire state because data centers are really using a lot of energy. And the two sponsors of this bill, it's a bipartisan bill sponsored by David Thomas from Ashtabula, who is a Republican, and then Tristan Rader from the Lakewood area, who's a Democrat. They say that this will actually make it so that communities will want data centers to come because they won't be such a drain on energy in that area. Because right now you've got communities that are passing moratoriums saying we don't want more data centers. We don't want any data centers because of what they do to the energy load.
Did I use some initials and not say what they were? American Electric?
American Electric Power.
Thank you. I knew somebody would catch that one before it got past the goalpost. Appreciate that. Now, House Republicans separately, Karen, are looking to end a sales tax exemption that they enjoy, and there's some disagreement with the governor, who says they should get the sales tax. Let's talk about that.
This is complicated. So what happened was that the House and Senate Republicans put into the budget an elimination of a sales tax break that data centers get on construction materials to build those data centers. Well, then Governor Mike DeWine, when he vetoed 67 items in the budget, vetoed that. So basically the tax break stays. Well, now you've got House Speaker Matt Huffman and Senate President Rob McCauley who want to override that veto. So once again, eliminating that tax break for data centers with the construction materials that they buy, saying basically that data centers are already getting a lot of tax breaks with abatements and other things. So there's no reason to treat data centers differently than you would treat another business coming into Ohio. So this would be the second potential override. Right after DeWine signed the budget, there was an override. There were 4 items that were supposed to be, but only one got overridden. This is potentially another one that we could see.
But what the data centers do is they invest a lot of money and build a facility. There's construction jobs, but long term, for all the tax break that's given, there are literally a handful of jobs at these places.
Well, and that's been the whole issue with the question of how much money and revenue do they raise versus what the impact is in that area. And they do have an impact on state revenue. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but the Chamber of Commerce has looked into it, saying it's like 95,000 jobs and more than $100 million in revenue that's coming in from these. But you're right. After construction is done, there aren't that many jobs at data centers. They're well-paying jobs, but there that many jobs there.
Right. And neighbors have been very vocal about not wanting data centers in a lot of places. And Zaria, I know you and Matt Richmond have been working on a story in Lorain County, a very vocal opposition to something in New Russia Township.
Yeah, and that project's interesting because it's not clear from developers, from the county commissioners that it'll officially be a data center, but that's what everybody's worried about, right? That's what data centers are a hot topic right now. And when you see this like 1,000-acre mega site popping up somewhere, the concern is that it's going to be a data center at the end of the day.
Right.
So things like air pollution, light pollution, noise pollution, and just like visual concerns of having this data center or potentially whatever right across the street. People are upset about that. They're concerned about that. And they want to protect their community from this development, regardless of what exactly it might be, especially if it's a data center at the end of the day.
There's some speculation there might be a data center at the IX Center
Right.
as well, and the city's saying no, it's not. And we're gonna, right after this break, talk about a number of other stories, including one about the IX Center and where it stands right now, and also a push to ramp up testing to make homes lead safe for children. So stay with us. It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre. Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre with Michelle Jarboe from News 5, Zaria Johnson from IdeaStream, and State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. And before we get back to the roundtable, I invite you to try your hand at our weekly IdeaStream News Quiz. It pulls together questions based on the week's news from IdeaStream and the State House News Bureau and the Ohio Newsroom. You'll find it at ideastream.org/quiz. Advocates for lead-free and safe housing for Cleveland residents outlined demands this week for the city to do more to protect children from the scourge of lead poisoning. Demands include increasing testing and a resource center. And after this all comes after the city lost more than $3 million in federal funding by moving too slowly on some remediation efforts. So Zaria, let's talk about what their demands are from Cleveland Lead Advocates for Safe Housing, or CLASH.
Yes, so they had a pretty long list of demands. You mentioned a couple of them, but they also wanted to increase lead testing for children in pre-K and in kindergarten through partnerships directly with CMSD. They also wanted to see additional funding to support lead testing in the city's mobile health clinics, so they can basically bring lead testing to people in communities directly. They also want to restore some incentives for landlords who choose to remediate lead-contaminated properties, and they're calling for an audit on agencies and organizations that have already received ARPA funding for lead remediation. They're basically saying that this will boost testing numbers, allow the city to better understand the extent and severity of childhood lead poisoning in the city, and also encourage remediation and better understand what money we've already spent on remediation overall.
The city and the health department say lead is still a very high priority.
Yes.
However, this group says, listen, we've been saying this for years. This is not new. Get it done.
Exactly, and that's what they emphasized at the press conference. They said that these demands we're making right now aren't even new. We had this plan ready for you guys back in 2019. We brought it to you, and they said they've seen the city implement certain they called watered down portions of their plan in ways that they say are less effective than would have been had they just implemented the whole thing. And they're also saying that their talking points have been used by different city officials and different city departments, but they're basically saying that the way the city has gone about it so far isn't effective. They're saying that we've seen that with the loss of the $3.3 million, and they want to push this all back to the forefront and say, now we're demanding it. This is what we need to see.
It was interesting to hear the health director say, Dr. David Margolius say that one of the best ways to stop lead poisoning is to build new housing, because those are houses that will never lead poison anybody.
Yeah, and that's the issue with the city of Cleveland in particular when it comes to lead paint, is that 90% of our housing stock was built before 1978, before lead paint was banned. So that means that that's 90% of homes that at least are at risk of being lead paint contaminated. And so in other cities like Chicago, where they had this big fire that destroyed a lot of their housing stock and they had to rebuild, that didn't happen in Cleveland. So we still have a lot of old houses that potentially put kids at risk. And Margolius has said multiple times that the best way to handle that is to either remediate these homes effectively or to build new ones altogether. So that's sort of where we're at this point.
All right, and we had heard that lead poisoning was down in Cleveland compared to previous years,
Right.
really the lowest it's ever been, but it's still something like 4 times the national average.
Yeah, exactly. And something Clash advocates pointed out was that if testing rates are not where they need to be, then how do we really know what the extent of lead poisoning is? But childhood lead poisoning rates are still high, and these are lifelong effects that we will never really fully understand. Erica Jarvis, she was one of the advocates who spoke. She was poisoned when she was 4. She's in her 30s now, and she said that I don't know how lead will affect my body as I continue to get older. I'm doing what I can, but I just don't know.
Right.
There's behavioral effects, the cognitive effects on kids. So it's lifelong. No amount of lead is good in the body. It's horrible.
All right. More than 25,000 abortions were reported in Ohio last year. That's a 15% increase since 2024, and the highest total since voters approved a reproductive rights amendment in 2023. The law protects abortions up to fetal viability around 22 weeks, along with contraception and miscarriage care. Karen, what does the new report reveal about the abortion trends in the state? How do the numbers compare historically?
Well, first of all, about 59% of all abortions are medication abortions. So these are done early. They have it's basically pills rather than at a surgical facility. And a fifth of all of those were patients from out of state. And abortion rights advocates are saying this shows that Ohio is where some of these people are coming because there are other states around Ohio that are restricting abortion access. And Ohio, of course, has abortion access because of that 2023 constitutional amendment that guaranteed reproductive rights access and certain other rights. And so I think it's interesting to see some of this. It shows that there has been an up and down kind of, especially after 2022 when that U.S. Supreme Court decision came down and Ohio had that 6-week abortion ban. Well, that's been basically thrown out, though there's still some litigation over some parts of it. But there are other laws that are being litigated and going through the court system because that amendment, the argument is, outlawed those laws, but there are still those, the state is still fighting for them.
So there's still a lot of policy debates that are going to continue to go on, court challenges still ahead. The numbers being higher in Ohio, does it show that Ohio's policy is more lenient, perhaps, than neighboring states?
Well, I think the amendment that we passed in 2023 is a big part of that because that has essentially put back abortion to the point of viability, 22 weeks. And so that made the 6-week ban moot. At least according to the Ohio Supreme Court. There are some other laws, though, about telehealth, about a waiting period, about burial of cremains that are still being litigated. They're on the books, but they're on hold because of lawsuits that are happening over them.
Okay. Let's move on to the IX Center, which we presaged a few minutes ago. The IX Center said last week that the piston-powered Autorama show, scheduled for later this month, will be its final show. But the future of the massive exhibition space near Hopkins Airport remains in question. Michelle, you've been doing the reporting on this. First of all, where were the shows that typically are at the IX Center if they don't stay there and that's still in question? Where would they go?
So some of them will go away because a number of them were in-house produced shows like the piston-powered Autorama. Others, which are shows that travel to various places, probably won't come back to Cleveland. And then the other major shows that a lot of people are familiar with, like the Home and Garden Show and the Auto Show and the Boat Show, they are having conversations or have made arrangements about moving to the Huntington Convention Center here downtown reluctantly because it's a big change in the type of venue, the length of show, and the parking situation for
way
those
different.
shows.
I mean, there's nothing but parking at the IX Center.
And that is one reason why some of these folks involved with the shows are still holding out hope that maybe there will be a way for them to stay put at the IX Center because there's not a clear deal yet for a new tenant to come in.
So let's talk about that. The city owns it, right?
The city owns it, and it is leased to a group of industrial real estate developers
And they
who
are
took over
not-
took over the lease in 2021.
And they are not event people.
No, they're not. The previous lessee was a group that was very involved with events and actually came up with some of the events.
So one of the things that we had heard rumored was there was a possible sale for a server farm, for a data center there. The city says, we don't want that kind of thing. There's a lot of folks that that say that kind of a move, as we said earlier, doesn't create a whole lot of jobs. That's not what we want in the building.
Yeah, so two things. Number one, the word sale. The city is
mean,
not going to
lease.
sell the
I meant
IX
lease,
Center.
yeah.
But I jumped on that just because there are people who think the IX Center is going to be sold, and the city is definitely not going to sell it. Number two, the data center thing, fake news. But it's been one of the most pervasive
Right.
rumors spread on the internet for months and months and months. The current lease does give the industrial real estate developers a lot of latitude in terms of the uses they could bring in. So in theory, they could put a data center there, but the developers are asking the city to extend the lease significantly, adding decades to it, to justify upfront investments in the building for a tenant. And the city says, we're not going to extend the lease for a data center. So that makes it moot, because there's no way you're going to spend a bunch of money to put a data center in there when then it goes away after a few years.
Speaking of data centers, because we talked about it earlier, Steven sent us an email, so a good place to work that in. He said, in addition to requiring data centers to bring their own power in order to build here, we should also require that the data they contain was and will be collected with consent and compensation. Too many creators have had their content stolen by AI companies. We need to start demanding that this technology is ethical. Stephen, thank you for your point of view. So the mayor said during that Burke Lakefront Airport discussion that there are tons of people that are asking about the IX Center, that there's a lot of interest. We hear about a possible Fortune 100 company on the site. What is your take, having covered real estate in this town for decades, about what might happen there?
The site is physically a slam dunk for industrial uses, aviation-related uses, advanced manufacturing. And those are the types of things that have been talked about over the past couple of years. But real estate deals take time, and they're complicated. And this site, as we reported last week, is particularly complicated because of the fact that the city of Cleveland owns it, but has an underlying tax sharing agreement with Brook Park that dates back to a legal settlement, decades ago.
Yeah, it used to be Brook Park's land, then it became Cleveland's land, and all kinds of
Yeah,
deals.
Cleveland bought the IX Center in 1999, and then there was this legal settlement a couple years later. But what the city's chief of integrated development told me is that tax sharing agreement, which pledges long-term tax revenues, a portion of them to Brook Park, until the IX Center is demolished fully, that makes it hard for Cleveland to incentivize a company to move in there, because the city would be losing money on the deal. And some listeners might not know this, but Cleveland originally bought the IX Center with plans to demolish it for a runway expansion at Hopkins.
Right.
So that building was supposed to be gone years ago. And a lot of the settlement language is predicated on that assumption that it was going to be torn down for an airport expansion.
Okay. Ohio House Speaker Matt Huffman doesn't like Governor Mike DeWine's idea of funding H2 Ohio, the state's clean water initiative, with state-issued bonds. So, Karen, the governor, this sounds almost like a legacy project for him. He loves the work that's been done and the success that's happened. He's going to deliver his final State of the State next week. Is this a policy proposal that he's going to raise, even though lawmakers are signaling no interest at this point?
Well, what's interesting is how we found out about this was in the reporter gaggle with Speaker Matt Huffman after a session in the House. Somebody asked him, what do you expect to hear from DeWine in that last State of the State speech? And Huffman said, we've been talking about this possible bond issue to raise money for H2 Ohio, because DeWine had made a request for H2 Ohio, which is his multi-agency clean water initiative he started in 2019. And lawmakers basically cut about 40% of it in the budget. So we found out about this from the speaker, who said he didn't want to do that. I asked Governor Mike DeWine the next day, hey, what do you have to say about the speaker saying this? And he said, well, he hasn't told me that. And then he went on to kind of get a little bit more specific. He really wants a bond issue on the November ballot. This would be something voters would have to approve that would basically create a dedicated stream of money to H2 Ohio, because he said there has to be some consistency in building wetlands and things like that, or else all the progress that H2 Ohio has made in getting rid of those algal blooms and the phosphorus in the lake and in streams will be lost.
And there's already been a big cut to that. So the question is, would further cuts even happen? He wants there to be, as you said, a dedicated funding for that. How do those who are opposed to it say that they will steward the environment?
Well, that's a good question. DeWine said he's talked to both of the leading candidates for governor, and he feels that they are supportive of H2 Ohio, but he is concerned. You're right when you said in the beginning that this is kind of a legacy project for him. It's one of the first projects he talked about in 2019 when he came into office. And so I think he wants to make sure that there is some sort of funding and that there isn't this dependence on the legislature to fund this, because the legislature has shown with their cuts this last time that there are some other priorities that they would like to fund.
Okay.
So the Ohio Environmental Council, other environmental groups are very interested in this idea, and they're on board.
All right, we have to get to this because we have video and they're so cute.
Right.
But Zaria, there were otters that were seen by the Cuyahoga River, and it's not just the cuteness. It turns out that this is a really good sign that the H2 Ohio, maybe it's H2 Ohio, maybe it's just the progress of time, but the Cuyahoga River is doing well.
Yeah, the cute factor is a big part of it. They were playing together. It's really adorable. But yeah, otters, they need a healthy ecosystem in the Cuyahoga River in order to survive, let alone play and do all these cute, lovable, cutesy things. Kent representatives are basically saying that this is a sign that the Cuyahoga River is doing well ecologically, especially thinking about sort of its troubled past with the river fire, the multiple river fires and infamous river fire in 1969. Otters were reintroduced into the Cuyahoga River in 1986, and so spotting them along the river is a good sign that the reintroduction is going well, that the ongoing remediation work along the river is working, and that the quality of the Cuyahoga River is improving overall.
All right, we're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, we're going to hit maybe 4 or 5 other stories, and we're going to do them fast because we got about 10 minutes to go. And I also have a thought from Craig. He says, please do not assume that everyone supports the air show. There are many of us in Ohio City who detest being held captive under the flight pattern of thunderous fighter jets every Labor Day weekend, holding our breath that a crash does not occur. He likes a quiet holiday, he says. Good point. Hadn't thought about
sorry,
that.
Craig.
I'm not living in the flight path. So, Craig, thank you. Your point of view has been shared, and we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You are back with the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre with Zaria Johnson, Michelle Jarbo, and Karen Kassler. Mary Outley, superintendent of Akron Public Schools, highlighted academic progress and financial pressures in her first State of the Schools address this week. And she called on the state to fully fund public schools, something all kinds of school administrators are talking about. Zaria, the district is dealing with significant financial pressure. What did she say in her speech about budget reductions proposed at the end of February?
Yeah, Outley said that they need to cut $58 million over the next 3 years to stay afloat. And she proposed a plan that calls for an $11 million budget reduction and cutting nearly 40 staff positions in the school district. But she said this plan hasn't been finalized at this point.
So she says the state needs to pony up. She was asking the state, lawmakers, and for families to help out. What did she say?
She said that chronic absenteeism is a major issue in the district, and with parents in particular, she said that please make sure your students get to school on time. Please make sure you're reading to your kids. And she said these things are these are things that could help appeal to families and lawmakers both together.
And when she talked about budget problems, one of the things she focused on was vouchers and how they're pulling money out of the public school systems, including Akron's.
Yes, she said that local tax dollars tend to follow students who go to private or charter schools over public schools, and she said that these vouchers divert more than $33 million from the school district's budget. And Akron is also part of a lawsuit that challenges the constitutionality of the voucher system in Ohio overall.
Okay. A phone call threatening violence forced a lockdown at Rocky River High School this week. I know that because I drove by, and it was surrounded by police cars with the lights on. People were all concerned. Obviously, you think the worst and something terrible is happening.
Right.
It turns out to be basically a threat that was called in. But it wasn't just Rocky River. Apparently, this is something that might have gone further.
Yeah, police are saying that this might have been part of a statewide sort of fake threat call-in situation. Shaker Heights had a call the same day. There was a bomb threat called in during ACT testing, so they had to go in under a brief lockdown. The schools throughout Rocky River were locked down on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's interesting. The other schools aren't really anywhere near the high school, but they were just to be safe, we're going to have, I think they called it a soft lockdown.
Exactly.
Let the kids go when parents got there. They let drivers leave the high school when, 1 o'clock or something, if they had a car, and then others could leave later. They tried to be as safe as possible. But what you see here is just a phone call can shut down not only a high school, but all the other schools in the district, as well as just concern the heck out of every parent that has a kid there.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting about this is when there are these fake calls and authorities respond. There's research that shows that these real lockdowns and these fake lockdowns have like similar links to increased anxiety and stress for parents and kids alike. There are also some research showing strong effects for kids with ADHD in particular. So, fake or
Yeah.
real, it takes a toll for
For
sure.
sure. And Karen, swatting's become an issue statewide. Lawmakers have looked at that. They've toughened penalties.
Yeah, in 2023, well, late 2022, I believe it was, the lawmakers passed a bill to kind of increase the penalties on swatting. And what was interesting is about a year after that, there were some swatting incidents nationwide, and Attorney General Dave Yost and one of the sponsors of that bill actually got swatted. So there was a little bit of blowback there. Those things still continue.
I'm curious if SWAT stands for something. I'm asking Lee and Aya in our booth because I feel like I might be letting an acronym go by. Swatting has
can't
to
have that
stand for
happening.
something, right? So we'll get an answer to that in just a moment. Cleveland City Council and the Bibb administration are still working toward an April 1 deadline for a new city budget. And Michelle, at the top of the council's priorities is more money to repair streets. The mayor had put in millions. They want millions more.
Yeah, that's right. The mayor's budget proposal includes, I believe, $12 million for roads and resurfacing, but the council president says that's not enough. Council's looking for something more in the neighborhood of $20 million. And, this is a perennial back and forth over the conditions of streets and which streets get repaved, where potholes get fixed. And council members say that potholes are one of the top complaints they get.
Yeah, they are. We did actually, I think we might have led the show or had it very early last week about how you have to slalom in order to drive in not just Cleveland streets. I had an incident on a ODOT maintained highway as well, but that's a huge concern. And council is saying we really need to pour more money into those holes.
Sure.
What else is going on in regards to the budget? Neighborhood investments, that type of stuff is obviously something comes up every budget cycle.
Yeah, so this comes up again and again as well. Council wants more money to direct to specific projects in their individual wards. And last year, council did pass a budget with additional funding for these neighborhood improvements over the mayor's objections. At this point, the council president have said that several council members didn't end up allocating some of that money that was pledged to them, so he can't guarantee that the mayor is going to agree to a funding request this time around.
And we talked about parking revenue on this show a number of times too. It's gone way up, and the council is saying they want to earmark that for something specific.
Yeah, they want to establish a fund to take some of the money from street parking revenue to put it towards street safety measures. And like you said, this comes right after they've increased parking rates and parking enforcement hours. So maybe that'd be a good chunk of change to divert to street safety.
All right, we talked about the cute otters. What about squirrels? They're pretty cute, aren't they?
Squirrels are cute. I think they're cute.
A weekend network outage in Medina County last month shut down phone and internet lines and key government systems, and the prime suspect was not a contractor as originally suspected. They thought somebody put a shovel in the ground and broke something. No, it wasn't a cyber attack either. It was one of those cute little squirrels. So what actually happened here, Zaria?
So yeah, they thought it was a contractor, but once they found the break, they basically found a nest inside of the fiber infrastructure, and they saw that a squirrel had chewed through some pretty important cables. So the internet and phone service was interrupted for county offices like the prosecutor's office and the auditor's office, and about 500 feet of fiber had to be replaced, and some infrastructure had to be repaired, all because of this hungry little squirrel.
And this is not an unusual occurrence. I've seen story after story where squirrels are chewing through, sometimes to their own detriment, power lines, but also data lines and those types of things. So they're cute, but
Dangerous.
they can be dangerous. The killer squirrel, right? Exactly, not quite, but it did take down, it killed the internet anyway.
Right.
All right, good news, it's Friday. The weekend is almost here. Bad news, we lose an hour of that weekend as we spring ahead. Sunday, at least we'll have more light in the evenings, so Big Met, here I come. It's the time of year that fire departments also and the Red Cross recommend you change the batteries in your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, so that's a warning for you now, or an admonition. Please get that done. But time change, is it going to ruin the day for you? Michelle, are you going to be late everywhere on Monday?
I have a first grader, so any time change messes everything up, and my heart goes out to all of the parents of young children.
All right, fair. What about you, Zaria?
I don't have any kids, but I run late regardless of what time it is.
So you run extra late.
Just expect that Monday morning.
Okay, our staff meeting is going to be at noon,
Thanks. Appreciate it.
not 11. And Karen, what about you?
Well, again, I have my own time zone, so, I just operate how I want.
Time moves for you, for sure. Well, thank you, Karen. Always good to talk with you. Thanks so much. And Michelle Jarbo, I appreciate you coming in.
Good to be here.
And Zaria, good to talk to you. I'll see you in the newsroom shortly.
See you shortly.